See here, adenine plus sugar forms adenosine plus phosphate forms adenylate acid or adenosine monophosphate 1-phosphate. And here similarly thymine plus deoxyribose. See here, second carbon atom, no oxygen. So deoxyribose, it is deoxythymidine plus 1-phosphate is there. That is deoxythymidine monophosphate, DTMP. So or deoxythymidinic acid, deoxythymidinic acid, and the bond, see here, N-glycosidic bond. This third bond we are studying, N-glycosidic bond. Okay. Next we will come to the another topic, that is metabolites. What are metabolites? Metabolites are the various components that are formed during various metabolic reactions in our body. They are called as metabolites. And depending upon their use, they have been classified into primary metabolites and secondary metabolites. Primary metabolites are various intermediate components, and they are going to be used for the next reactions. These metabolites are formed in one reaction and they are going to be used in the next reactions within the body itself. They are called as primary metabolites. For example, you can see here glucose 6-phosphate, 3-phosphoglycerate, and so on. These are primary metabolites. Whereas the secondary metabolites, they are the final products, and their utilization for the plant still it is not very clear. So they are stored in storage organs, and some of the secondary metabolites are alkaloids. Alkaloids are morphines, codeine, pigments like carotenes, anthocyanins which give color to the fruits and flowers, terpenoids, monoterpenes, diterpenes, essential oils like lemongrass oil, toxic substances, toxins like abrin, ricin. So these are all produced by certain plants. Say abrin is produced in Abrus precatorius crabside, and ricin is produced from castor. So toxic substances. Then drugs, various drugs like vincristine, vinblastine, curcumin, and similarly lectins, concave. These are adjunctions, binding agents. So concavalin A is one type of lectin, and various polymeric substances like rubbers, gums, resins, cellulose. All these are some of the secondary metabolites. So far what we have discussed, they are all micromolecules, where the molecular weight less than 800 daltons. Exception for that, fats. Okay. Let's come to another group of macromolecules, larger molecules. So these are nothing but made up of these micromolecules only, but their molecular weight exceeds. They grow just like, say for example, a bead, a pebble is a micromolecule, a monomer. A chain of bead is nothing but a macromolecule. So major biomacromolecules, what are the major biomacromolecules? Polysaccharides, once again they are nothing but carbohydrates. Then proteins, lipids, nucleic acids, DNA and RNA. Now let's come to proteins. What are proteins? Proteins are derived from Greek word proteus, meaning prime importance. Prime means very important, just like prime minister, very important, first minister, like that. So prime importance. And the term given by a Swedish biochemist called as Jan Jacob Berzelius. So proteins are made up of amino acids. They are the polymers of amino acids, many amino acids. Just these 20 amino acids. The number of amino acids in each protein may vary, maybe 50 to thousands of amino acids. Just like 26 letters in English, we arrange different arrangements to write words, sentences, paragraphs and books. So like that, the proteins are also derived from these 20 amino acids, varieties of proteins. And these are polymers of amino acids. And some of the types of proteins are there. So depending upon the structure and function, proteins. Yes, this is not the classification. This is only the examples of proteins. Some proteins they give structure. They are called as structural proteins. For example, collagen, which is found in the tissues. Collagen fiber, thick fibers, collagen fibers, the most abundant animal protein. Keratin, which is found in hair, nail. It is another type of protein. Structure, they give the structure. Then catalytic proteins, they carry out catalytic reactions, biological reactions. They are enzymes, they mediate. So various enzymes, say for example, our digestive enzymes, trypsin, chymotrypsin, pepsin, so all these are the enzymes. Then hormones. So some proteins act as hormones, they bring about intracellular responses. One of the best example of protein hormone is insulin, which is helpful for glucose metabolism. Then some proteins they act as defense proteins. Best example they are antibodies. They fight against the foreign substances. They provide immunity. Then some proteins act as receptors. They are found on the surface of the membranes. So they act as receptors. So to produce the inter and intracellular responses for various stimuli. Say for example for hormones, sensory receptors. Then transport proteins. These are nothing but channel proteins found across the membranes, cell membranes. So one such example is GLUT4, glucose transporter 4, or calcium channels, potassium channels, sodium channels. They allow entry and exit of various molecules in and out of the cell. Now here are some of that what we have discussed. So same it is picturized here. So collagen. So it is the protein found in the to give the tensile strength to the cells. Tissue, sorry. The receptor protein which is found on the surface of the membrane. See here, it is insulin receptor. This insulin binds to this. And see this is the channel protein, GLUT4. Glucose binds to this GLUT4 and it is transported from outside to inside the cell. And similarly here insulin, another protein hormone what we have discussed in the previous slide. So it is binding to its respective receptor. So these are some of the various proteins. Now as I told, the defense proteins, antibodies. This is an antibody. And here is the enzyme, rubisco. This is the rubisco, the largest, the most abundant protein in the world, rubisco. Whereas collagen is the most abundant protein, animal protein. Whereas rubisco is the most abundant protein in the world, which carries out photosynthetic reaction. Now proteins, after the synthesis, they have a definite structure. So there are four structures: primary structure, secondary structure, tertiary structure, and quaternary structure. So how these structures are? So this is primary structure, secondary structure, these two secondary structure, this is tertiary structure, and this is quaternary structure. The primary protein, primary structure is a linear chain. It's a straight chain of amino acids. Many amino acids they exist in straight chain. One end ends with the carboxylic acid group. That end is called as C terminal. The other end will be ending with the amino group. That is called as N terminal or amino terminal. So here is how the beads of proteins, amino acids are arranged in this protein. So insulin is the best example for primary protein. And most of the proteins, first they are synthesized as primary protein. Later they modify themselves to assume secondary, tertiary, and quaternary structure. Now let's come to the secondary structure, secondary protein. See here, the single protein is single protein chain. Here this protein chain, it has undergone coiling in the form of helix, right-handed coiling. This is called as alpha helix. See here, the amino acids which were very far away in linear chain, they come closer. See in linear chain, the amino acids will be very far away. Those amino acids which were very far away, they come closer and they form a temporary hydrogen bonds between one amino acid and the another amino acid which come closer. to have a strength. So this is one. Secondary structure is existing two form. One is alpha helix, another one is beta pleated or beta sheets. Beta pleated or beta sheets. See, in beta pleated, the amino acid chain folds in such a way that maybe parallel folding or anti-parallel folding. This is anti-parallel folding. See here, this side is N terminal, this side is C terminal. This side is N terminal, this side is C terminal. If it is like this, then it is called as anti-parallel folding. If both arrows are in same direction, that means both N terminal, C terminal in same direction, then it is called as parallel beta sheets. So secondary proteins example, our hair, keratin, nail, silk fibroin. So all these are the examples of secondary proteins. Next, tertiary structure. The secondary protein undergoes a definite three-dimensional folding. The secondary protein undergoes a definite three-dimensional folding coiling. That is called as conformation. To become functional. So most of the proteins are tertiary proteins. One example is myoglobin or muscular protein. That is a tertiary protein. Then quaternary protein. Quaternary protein means two or more tertiary proteins. See here. Earlier what we have discussed is a single polypeptide chain. A quaternary protein is that is made up of more than two different polypeptide chains together to form a single function. That is a quaternary protein. See here, collagen is a quaternary protein made up of three different proteins, three polypeptide chains. Hemoglobin, another quaternary protein made up of four polypeptide chains. In that, two are alpha chains and two are beta chains. So hemoglobin is a quaternary protein. Next we come to carbohydrates, polysaccharides. As we have discussed, monosaccharides, one sugar unit, disaccharides, two sugar units, polysaccharides, a chain of many sugar units. So they are the macromolecules. So here we see many polysaccharides. So example for that: starch, glycogen, cellulose, inulin. These are homopolysaccharides. Homo means they are made up of same type of sugar units. Same sugar molecules are repeated several times. Whereas heteropolysaccharides, they are made up of different monosaccharides. Chitin, peptidoglycan, etc. Now let's come to starch. Starch is a polysaccharide. It is made up of glucose. It's a polymer of glucose. And it is the reserve food material in various plants. For example, potato, sweet potato, cereals, rice, wheat, jowar, maize. This is a major energy source. And here the starch is made up of two components. One is amylose, which is soluble in water. Nearly 15 to 30% of the starch is made up of amylose. It's a linear unbranched polymer of glucose. Here, all the glucose molecules are linked by alpha 1,4 glycosidic bonds. Next, another component in starch is amylopectin. Nearly 70 to 85% is made up of amylopectin. It's a branched molecule. It is water insoluble. Here also, the linkage is alpha 1,4 glycosidic linkage. But at branchings, as I said, it is a branched molecule. At branching, it is alpha 1,6 glycosidic linkage. That means first carbon atom of one glucose and sixth carbon atom of one glucose, another glucose in the chain, another chain, they are involved in the formation of glycosidic bond. formation of glycosidic bond. So this is what amylopectin. It is water insoluble, and the frequency of branching. Frequency for every 24 to 30 glucose units, every 24 to 30 glucose units branching occurs. So this is all about starch. A similar molecule is there, and okay, before that, now let us see why starch gives blue black in color. Somewhere in 9th standard you have tested for starch. When we add iodine to starch or potato, so it gives bluish black color. Why it gives bluish black color? Means because the amylose reacts with iodine and forms a triiodide complex, starch iodine complex. A triiodide, that is starch iodine complex, that develops bluish black in color. Next, a similar type, another one, that is glycogen. It is animal starch because it is the reserve food material in animals. It is stored in liver, it is stored in muscle tissue. It is similar to amylopectin. Similar to amylopectin means here also it is a polymer of glucose, alpha D glucose, alpha 1,4 glycosidic linkage, and it is also branched like amylopectin. At branching it is 1,6 glycosidic linkage. Same, everything is same. Then what the difference means? The branching frequency is for every 8 to 12 sugar units or glucose units branching occurs. Whereas in amylopectin for every 24 to 30 branching occurs. Whereas in glycogen once in every 8 to 12 sugar units or glucose units branching occurs. That's the only difference. Next we come to another carbohydrate or polysaccharide, that is cellulose, which is the main component of plant cell wall. Cotton is the purest form of cellulose. 80 to 85% of the cotton is made up of cellulose. Now what is cellulose? It is also a polymer of glucose. First thing is it is also a polymer of glucose. Then what is the difference? All the glucose molecules are beta glucose, beta D glucose. That means OH group is situated above, and the linkage is beta 1,4 glycosidic linkage, beta 1,4 glycosidic bond, beta 1,4 glycosidic bond. So we do not have the mechanism or the enzyme to digest cellulose, whereas animals, herbivorous animals, they can digest the cellulose. So cellulose does not provide any energy to the human beings. Next, another molecule, another example for polysaccharide, that is inulin. Inulin is a polymer of fructose. Inulin is a polymer of fructose. Of course, we cannot digest inulin. Next, chitin. What is chitin? Chitin is found in the cell wall of fungi. Chitin is found in the exoskeleton of insects. So it is made up of nitrogen containing glucose and galactose. That is N-acetyl glucosamine. Nitrogen containing acetamide. It is acetamide, acetic acid plus amide group, amino group, acetamide. For that it is called as N-acetyl glucosamine. Sometimes N-acetyl galactosamine also is there. So chitin is made up of N-acetyl glucosamine, N-acetyl galactosamine, alternating like. Therefore it is called as heteropolymer because it is made up of different sugar molecules. Next we come to nucleic acids, which are the main components of our DNA and RNA, which is our heredity material. Our entire system, body function is controlled by these nucleic acids. Okay. There are two types of nucleic acids. One is RNA, ribonucleic acids. Another one is DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid. As already we have discussed in the previous, the main components of these nucleic acids, they are the nitrogen bases, sugars and phosphate. Nitrogen bases in RNA, they are adenine, guanine, these two are the purines. Then cytosine and uracil, these two are the pyrimidines. Purines are once again 9-membered rings. Pyrimidines are 6-membered rings. And they are also have a sugar molecule, pentose sugar, that is ribose, and a phosphate group, phosphoric acid. DNA, the only difference between RNA and DNA is that, so here molecular wise, so here thymine is present instead of uracil, and deoxyribose sugar is there instead of ribose. Molecular wise. Okay. Now let's come to the structure of DNA. Structure of a double helix structure. See, these are the great personalities who elucidated the structure of DNA. One is Francis H. Crick, James D. Watson, and Morris Frederick Wilkins. These two got the Nobel Prize. These three got the Nobel Prize for their work in the year 1963. They proposed the structure of DNA in 1953 and got the Nobel Prize in 1962. And inside there is one lady called as Rosalind Franklin. Actually, she was the one who did all the preliminary work and the data in collaboration with this lady. So all these three proposed the DNA structure. But by the time the Nobel Prize awarded, she was no more. She died in the year 1958. There is no provision of awarding Nobel Prize posthumously. So therefore, the Nobel Prize was shared only among these three. Now, let us come to the structure of DNA. Already we have discussed about the nucleotide. See here, this is one nucleotide. The base plus sugar plus phosphate forms one nucleotide. This one nucleotide and another nucleotide undergoes condensation, loses a molecule of water, and forms a dinucleotide. Two nucleotides. This one nucleotide, this another nucleotide. In between phosphate is there. And then the bond that is formed is phosphodiester bond. See, another bond we have discussed. Third bond. First glycosidic bond, peptide bond. The another form of glycosidic bond is N-glycosidic bond. Already we have discussed. Then this is the third one, phosphodiester bond. What is this phosphodiester bond? Oxygen is present in between, two bonds are there. This is called an ester bond. Here another bond is there, another ester bond is there, two ester bonds are there, diester. In between phosphate is there, therefore it is called as phosphodiester bond. The bond that joins two nucleotides, that is phosphodiester bond. So DNA is a double-stranded polynucleotide chain. See here, many nucleotides. DNA is a double-stranded polynucleotide chain. And both the strand, each chain is made up of alternative phosphate, sugar, phosphate, sugar, phosphate, sugar backbone. See here, sugar, phosphate, backbone. And both the strands run anti-parallelly. What do you mean by this anti-parallelly? One strand runs 5' 3' direction, the opposite strand runs 3' direction. What do you mean by that? It is the orientation of this carbon molecule with the sugar. Look here. This is the fifth carbon atom of this chain. It is facing upwards. And this is the third carbon atom. This is the third carbon atom of the opposite chain, which is facing upwards. So this is 3' direction, this is 5' direction. I mean 5', 3' direction. So both the strands are anti-parallel to each other. Both the strands are anti-parallel to each other. So alternative phosphate sugar backbone. And to the sugar molecule, nitrogen bases are attached. The base of one strand makes a pair with the base of the opposite strand with the help of hydrogen bond. It's the fourth bond we are studying here. Fourth biological bond, hydrogen bond. The base of one strand makes a pair with the base of the opposite strand with the help of hydrogen bonds. And the base pairing is so specific that always purine makes a pair with pyrimidine with the opposite strand. So purine base pairs with pyrimidine and vice versa. Pyrimidine with purine, never with purine or pyrimidine with pyrimidine. And base pairs are complementary to each other. See here, always adenine base pairs with thymine of the opposite strand with two hydrogen bonds and vice versa. Adenine, thymine and adenine with two hydrogen bonds. Similarly, therefore, adenine and thymine are complementary to each other. Similarly, cytosine makes a pair with guanine of the opposite strand with three hydrogen bonds and vice versa. Guanine with cytosine. Therefore, guanine and cytosine are complementary base pairs, complementary bases. And so measurement of DNA. So bDNA, Watson and Crick model, there are plenty, various models are there, but Watson and Crick model is called as bDNA, right-handed coiling. And that model, DNA coils over an imaginary axis. See, here is an imaginary axis, center. And DNA is coiling over an imaginary axis in right-handed manner. And each turn or helix, here to here, each turn or helix, measures about 3.4 nanometer or 34 angstroms. And each turn consists of 10 nucleotide base pairs. Each helix contains 10 nucleotide base pairs. Therefore, the distance between two base pairs is 0.34 nanometer. 0.34 nanometer, see here. And the diameter of the DNA, the thickness, the diameter of the DNA is 2 nanometer. Diameter of the DNA is 2 nanometer. So this is the structure explained by James T. Watson, Francis S. Crick. And the data, the Maurice Wilkins as well as Rosalind Franklin, they were working together and they found out the basic structures, basic information about the DNA molecules by extracrystallography study. So the whatever I have discussed, the same thing is depicted here. Now let's come to another topic, that is metabolism. What is metabolism? We have eaten the food will be digested, that is metabolism. We breathe, respire, that is also a type of metabolism, that is physiological. So then what is metabolism? Definition: the various or sum total biochemical reactions that are taking place in the body or tissues or cells is referred to as metabolism. See here, metabolism is having two parts. One is anabolism and another one is catabolism. Metabolism is synthesis process, constructive process, formative process, whereas catabolism is a destructive process, breakdown process. For example, photosynthesis is anabolism. Whereas respiration is catabolism. It's a breakdown process. DNA replication, DNA synthesis, protein synthesis, all these are anabolic process. Digestion is a catabolic process. This breakdown. During each and every metabolic reactions, one component is converted into another molecule or another component. And this conversion of one molecule into another molecule is called as turnover. It is called as turnover. And the number of molecules converted from one form to another form over a period of time, unit time, that is called as turnover number. The number of molecules converted from one form to another form per unit time is called as turnover number. Here are some of the examples. Anabolic pathways. See here, acetic acid is finally synthesized into cholesterol. That is anabolic pathway. Glucose is converted to lactic acid, anaerobic respiration. That is a catabolic process. So here, anabolic process requires the input of energy. You have to give the energy. Whereas the catabolic process liberates the energy ATP, biological energy ATP. Now here is the ATP. adenosine triphosphate. It is nothing but this is adenine, a ribose sugar, and 3 phosphate molecules are there. 3 phosphate molecules are there, ATP. During liberation of energy, breakdown of one phosphate liberates amount of energy. Second phosphate liberates another amount of energy. This energy is going to be used for our biological works. So who discovered this ATP? Well, long back. So ATP discovered by Carl Loman and Yellapragada Subbarao independently. Yellapragada Subbarao, Indo-American scientist. So he born in Andhra Pradesh and became a citizen of America. Then the importance of ATP was told by Fritz Albert Lippmann. He said that ATP is the biological currency of energy. Whereas Alexander Todd synthesized ATP in the laboratory. So we are living. What is that living state? So there is a difference between dead and living, or non-living and living. How do we consider it as a living state? What is meant by living state? So our body temperature is maintained constantly. So all molecules are converted from one form to another form constantly. During this process, the entire living system tends to become stable, tends to become constant. It tends to become equilibrium. If once equilibrium is formed, then it is the end of the story. Then it is not called as living state. So what is that living state means? The non-equilibrium or in-equilibrium steady state is called as living state. To do work, always it should be in equilibrium state. So in a plain road, a ball cannot move. If the road is up and down, then only the ball moves. If two equally strong persons pushing the car, one from front side and one from back side, does the car move? No. So that means then it will be in equilibrium. So equilibrium means no work. So living state means constant working in equilibrium state. That is called as living state. Now come to another very important biomolecules. They are enzymes. Chemistry you have studied about catalysts. Whereas in the biological system, the same catalysts are done by the macromolecules called proteins. They are the enzymes. The term enzymes was given by Wilhelm Huene, a German physiologist in 1878. These are the biocatalysts, biological catalysts. Almost all enzymes are made up of proteins. Why I am using the word almost all? Because there are certain non-protein enzymes also. Catalytic RNA, that is called as ribozyme. So here ribozymes. So its RNA is acting as ribozyme. So this was discovered by Sidney Altman and Thomas Zech, and because of that they got the Nobel Prize in 1989. Now how do enzymes bring about the reaction? See here, see one example here. Carbon dioxide and water reacts to form carbonic acid. The enzyme involved is carbonic anhydrase. Without enzyme, see only 200 molecules will be converted into products in 1 hour. Whereas the carbonic anhydrase converts 6 lakhs molecules in 1 second. Carbonic acid, see how fast the enzymes are. This is the example. How fast? There are other examples, enzymes still faster. See, there is one enzyme called as catalase, which breaks down hydrogen peroxide into water and hydrogen, and its rate is 10 raised to the power of 7 molecules per second. This is the fastest enzyme in the world, whereas this is one of the fastest enzymes in the world, and whereas the fastest enzyme in the world is catalase. Now, how these enzymes bring the reaction very fast? Let's understand in this graph. So for any biological reaction, any reaction you require, say, substrate to be converted into product means you require the substances will go to a transition state. For that you require energy. That energy, minimum amount of energy that is required to convert the substrate into product, that is called as activation energy. See, in the absence of energy, you require large amount of energy to convert the substrate into product. Whereas in the presence of enzyme, you require very less amount of energy. That means the enzymes will reduce the activation energy. The enzymes will reduce the activation energy. Best example we can take, say for example, solar water heater. What is the temperature for us to have bath? Maybe 45 degrees at the most. Normal temperature is 45 degrees. And what is the normal temperature of water? Maybe 25 degrees. That means we have to heat the water another 20 degrees to heat, so that it should suitable for our body to have bath. During summer it goes up to 80 degrees also. That is different. But in rainy season, cloudy day, what will happen? So the cloud, even then clouds are there, but water will not remain more just 25 degrees only. So solar heats up to 35-37 degrees. That means solar water heater heats up to 37 degrees. Then you have to heat only the remaining 7 or 8 degrees to get the optimum temperature for suitable temperature for your bath. So solar water heater, in the absence of solar water heater, you have to give heat for 20 degrees, whereas in the presence of solar water heater, you have to give only for 7 degrees. That means similarly here the enzymes reduce the activation energy, thereby enzymes are very effective in bringing about the biochemical reactions. That is the concept of this graph. And one thing you have to understand here, the substrate here, the product is here, and this is exothermic reaction. That means the energy is liberated. Whereas if the product comes above the level of the substrate, then it is endothermic reaction. Then you have to give the reaction. You have to give the input the energy. Now, how do enzymes bring about the action? There are various theories are there. In that, two theories have been put forward. One is called as Emil Fischer proposed lock and key model in 1894 itself, and whereas the another one is Daniel Koshland proposed induced fit model. According to lock and key model, each enzyme will have a specific site called as active site, and the specific substrate goes and binds to the active site to form enzyme substrate complex, and then these substrates are broken down into the respective product, and then enzymes and products are separated. Whereas Daniel Koshland's induced fit model explains slight modification, same here also active site, there is no change. But what is the concept of this is, the active site is not fixed unlike lock and key model. Whenever the substrate approaches the active site of the enzyme, active site adjusts its shape to the shape of the substrate. Active site adjusts to the shape of the substrate, and then that is called induced fit model. Active site fits into the substrate, and then the substrate is converted into product. So this is the most accepted model of enzyme action. Now, see, enzymes are proteins, as I told. They are very sensitive to temperature. They are very sensitive to pH, acids or alkali, and they are very sensitive to substrate concentration. Now, what are the effects of these temperature, pH as well as substrate concentration on the enzyme activity? Let's have a look here. See, why the materials that are kept in refrigerator do not spoil? Why the materials kept outside the refrigerator spoil? Because the bacteria will spoil. Bacteria do not spoil. The enzymes that are secreted by the bacteria, they carry out decomposition or digestion of the molecules, and the food gets spoiled. Why in the refrigerator the temperature is always less, 4 degrees or sub-zero. So therefore the enzyme activity is 0. So here temperature plays a very important role. See here, this is the temperature and this is the rate of the enzyme reaction. So increase the temperature, 0 degree means there is no activity. Increase the temperature, the enzyme activity also increases. At one particular temperature, the enzyme activity is maximum. This is the maximum activity. At one particular temperature, the enzyme activity is maximum. This is the temperature at which the enzyme activity is maximum. this temperature here it is showing 40 degrees. Normally it is not 40 degrees, it is 37 degrees. This temperature is called as optimum temperature. The temperature at which the enzyme activity is maximum, that is called as optimum temperature. Further increase in the temperature, the enzymes are proteins. So the protein structures permanently damaged, that is called as denatured. The enzyme activity is drastically reduced. Best example, if you boil the egg white. So when in raw egg white is liquid. Once you boil, it gets solidified. So can you convert it back? It is irreversible damage. So enzyme activity is denatured. So this is how the temperature is having an effect on the activity of the enzyme action. Let's see effect of pH, hydrogen ion concentration. See here two enzymes are there. One is amylase, salivary amylase, which is in the mouth. The saliva pH is 6.8 to 7. It is almost neutral. Whereas in the stomach, gastric juice, the pH is 2.5 to 3. Hydrochloric, because of the hydrochloric. See, pepsin is active in pH at 2. Yeah. So pepsin's optimum pH is 2. It is not active in small intestine because the pH in the small intestine is 7.6. Salivary amylase active optimum temperature pH is, it is active at the best. Maximum activity is exhibited by salivary amylase at pH 7. So optimum pH for amylase is 7. Optimum pH for pepsin is 2. Optimum pH for pancreatic enzymes is 7.6 to 8. The different enzymes will have different optimum pH, but most of the enzymes will work at neutral pH. So pH varies from enzyme to enzyme. That pH where the enzyme activity is maximum, that is called as optimum pH. Now here, effect of concentration of the substrate on enzyme activity. How this enzyme activity, so substrates have the effect. See, initially this is the substrate concentration. This is the substrate concentration, and this is the rate of reaction, velocity of reaction. Initially, substrate concentration is 0, the enzyme activity is also 0. Increase the substrate concentration, the enzyme activity also increases, slowly increases. After reaching certain level, further increase in the substrate concentration, the enzyme activity will not increase, it will become stationary, straight line. Why? Because all the active sites of the enzyme will be filled with the substrates. So if you want to increase further action, then you have to increase the quantity of the enzyme. Now, here you see, this is the maximum velocity, Vmax, maximum activity of the enzyme. So here, if you take half of the Vmax, 50% of the maximum velocity, the concentration that is required to achieve 50% of the maximum velocity is called as half Vmax is called as Km constant, Michaelis-Menten constant. A biochemist, an enzymologist who gave this concept, Michaelis-Menten constant. So it is the concentration of the substrate that is required by any enzyme to achieve 50% of the maximum velocity. That is called as Km constant. Now, enzymes are proteins. They have active sites. Enzymes, activity of the enzymes can be easily either inhibited or activated. Now, let's talk about the inhibition of the enzyme action. How enzymes can be inhibited? There are different ways to inhibit the enzyme action, and the molecules which will inhibit the enzyme action, they are called as inhibitor molecules or inhibitors. So depending upon the type, there are different types. One is competitive inhibition, non-competitive inhibition, uncompetitive inhibition, and allosteric modulation of enzymes. Let's come to competitive inhibition. See here in this picture, this is the substrate and this is the inhibitor molecule. The substrate molecule and inhibitor molecule have same structural similarities. So now, instead of substrate going by to the active site, the inhibitor molecule competes for the same active site. inhibitor molecule competes for the same active site, then there is no further progression of the reaction. This type of inhibition is called as competitive inhibition. Best example is photorespiration. The active site for carbon dioxide as well as oxygen is same for rubisco. So in the less concentration of carbon dioxide, oxygen goes and binds to the rubisco. Then instead of carboxylation reaction, it carries out oxygenation reaction. So this is competitive inhibition. So another example is succinate to fumarate, succinate dehydrogenase. You will study this in Krebs cycle. Succinate dehydrogenase converts succinate into fumarate. There is one molecule similar to succinate called as malonate. So it malonate competes for the same active site of the succinate dehydrogenase. So then this is competitive inhibition. The non-competitive inhibition. See here, this is an enzyme. This is the substrate active site, and this is the inhibitor molecule. The enzymes will have another site somewhere very far away than the active site. The molecule goes and binds to that site, that is called as inhibitor site, and changes the three-dimensional conformation of the enzyme. The enzyme structure is altered. Then the substrate can no longer bind to the active site. Then the enzyme activity is reduced, inhibited. Uncompetitive means another type. Here, the inhibitor molecule always associates with the enzyme substrate complex. Enzyme, when the substrate binds to the enzyme, at that time inhibitor goes and binds and inhibits the reaction. This is called as uncompetitive. See, another type, fourth one is allosteric modulation of enzymes. Let us understand the reaction. Here a series of enzyme reactions. This is enzyme, this is substrate. In the first step, enzyme binds to the substrate and gets converted into intermediate compound. The intermediate compound binds to the second enzyme substrate complex, and converted into another substrate, another intermediate component. This intermediate component binds to another third enzyme, so then final product is formed. Now this final product goes and binds to the enzyme. Here it is shown first enzyme. Any enzyme it may bind. Either this may go and bind to this, or this may go and bind to this, anyone. That is called as allosteric modulation. These intermediate compounds are the final products of the same enzyme cascade reactions. Goes and binds to any of the enzymes in the same reaction and inhibit the reaction. It is a negative feedback mechanism. So this type of inhibition is called as allosteric modulation. Best example is, for example, see, glucose is converted into glucose 6-phosphate by the enzyme phosphohexokinase. Now here glucose 6-phosphate itself is an allosteric inhibitor. The product itself goes and binds to the hexokinase enzyme. So this is the best example. Now classification and nomenclature of enzyme action. Classification and nomenclature of enzyme action. So depending upon the reactions they are classified, carried out. So internationally the enzymes have been classified into the 6 classes. What are those 6 classes? Oxidoreductases or dehydrogenases. So they carry out oxidation as well as reduction reaction. Addition of hydrogen is reduction. Removal of hydrogen is oxidation. So they add hydrogen or remove hydrogen. Therefore they are called as dehydrogenases or oxidoreductases. Pyruvate dehydrogenase, succinate dehydrogenase. So these are they come under this group. Then transferases. They transfer one group from one molecule to another molecule. That is called as, so for example, transaminases, kinases, phosphorylases. They are transferases. Next, hydrolases. They carry out hydrolysis. They add water and split the molecule. All digestive enzymes, they are all hydrolases. Then isomerases. They carry out structural rearrangement. They bring about isomerization of the enzyme. Structural reaction. Glucose 6-phosphate is converted into fructose 6-phosphate by isomerase enzyme by altering the structure. Molecular formula remains the same. Only the structural rearrangement takes place. Such enzymes are called as isomerases. Then liases. Why they are, the reaction is like hydrolysis, but they do not add water. Without they split the molecule without adding water. They split the molecule without adding water. These hydrolysis, during this process, they may create unsaturation or carbon-carbon double bond. They may create. Then ligases. They are called as synthetases, ligases. So they are the molecular glues. They are the molecular glues. The synthesis. They establish the bond. Condensation reaction. Say for example, peptide bond is formed by removal of water. That is done by ligases. One group of ligases. So it is nothing but the same previous slide. It is given the same. Next, let's come to another very important topic, that is the cofactors. What are these cofactors? Enzymes are made up of proteins, but the protein part of the enzyme is not so efficient to work. So they need some assistant substances, assistant molecules to increase the efficiency of the enzyme. These molecules which will increase the efficiency of the enzymes, they are called as cofactors. These are non-protein organic or inorganic molecules. These are non-protein organic or inorganic molecules. They are the helper molecules to increase the efficiency of the enzymes. So depending upon the type, there are different types of cofactors. One is prosthetic group, another one is coenzyme, another one is metal ions. Prosthetic group, they are the non-protein part. They are always bound to the protein part of the enzyme. The protein part of the enzyme is called as apoenzyme. The protein part of the enzyme is called as apoenzyme. The prosthetic group, they always covalently, permanently, irreversibly bound to the protein part. Without this, the protein part will not work. Okay, so this is called as prosthetic group. So example for prosthetic group, FAD for succinate dehydrogenase, heme for cytochrome oxidase. So these are the prosthetic groups. Whereas coenzymes, these are the organic molecules. They are not always bound to the protein part. They are dissociated. Only they get associated with the apoenzyme at the time of biochemical reaction. Once the reaction is over, they get dissociated. So these are called as coenzymes. The example, NAD, nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide. So apoenzyme and prosthetic group, apoenzyme and coenzymes together, it is called as holoenzyme or holozyme. Another type of cofactor is metal ions, metallic ions. They do two functions. Some will activate the enzyme action, they are called as activators. Some will inhibit the enzyme action, they are called as inhibitors. Here let us discuss only about the activators. Some metal ions will increase the activity. So most of the metabolic enzymatic reactions require one or the other enzymes, another metal ions. See here, zinc is very essential for carbonic anhydrase or carboxypeptidase, etc. Similarly, copper is necessary for cytochrome oxidase. Magnesium is necessary for hexokinase. Molybdenum is necessary for nitrogenase, and so on. These are some of the metal ions. So this is all about cofactors. So how the different coenzymes, cofactors, they are interacting. Okay, so this is all about the chapter biomolecules. I hope you have well understood. So thank you one and all.